Welcome to Season 1, Episode 9 of Athena Rising, where we pose 36 questions to powerhouse female lawyers. Why 36? That's the number of states that were required to ratify the 19th Amendment and give women the right to vote and take power into our own hands.
Our guest today is Suneeta Hazra, a white-collar criminal defense partner at Arnold and Porter, and the former chief of the criminal division for the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado.
In this episode, Suneeta talks about one of her more unusual cases at the U.S. Attorney's Office, the prosecution of Harold Henthorn, who was convicted of pushing his wife, a successful ophthalmologist and the mother of their 7-year-old child, from a 50-foot cliff on their 12th wedding anniversary celebration, all for a $4.5 million life insurance policy.
You definitely don't want to miss this episode. We're glad you're tuning into our podcast, whether you are an Athena or an ally. Welcome. Ladies, let's rise. Welcome to Athena Rising. Hi, Vanessa.
Hey, Marisol, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
This week we have Suneeta Hazra on the program. Suneeta works at Arnold and Porter now as a shareholder in their white-collar department. She is the former chief of the criminal division of the United States Attorney's Office in the District of Colorado. She also held various positions at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Colorado. I think chief of economic crimes. She was chief of major crimes. She was also a prosecutor at the Department of Justice. And so we look forward to having her and asking her our 36 questions. Welcome, Suneeta.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys. Thank you.
Great. So let's kick it off. You're a partner at Arnold and Porter right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day?
Certainly. So I am a partner, as you said, in the white-collar government investigation. So I have a nice mix where I do active, investigations where I'm helping clients navigate inquiries from the government. I also have some internal investigations as well as compliance work. And then I have a little bit of civil litigation as well, just to kind of round out the mix. But it's a nice combination of, getting people sort of in line, getting people cleaned up before the government finds out, as well as helping them when the government comes knocking.
Okay. And just to clarify for our listeners that don't know what compliance work means, can you just tell us what that is?
Sure. So it's just when companies want to make sure that their processes and systems are in accordance with various guidelines and laws, just helping them make sure they're operating under best practices and doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, DOJ has been really busy and active under this administration with enforcing rules and regulations in this space, and also coming out with their own policies with respect to compliance work. Is there a particular industry that your work's now coming from in the past few years, or is it just across the board?
It's across the board, but I have a particular focus in life science. So I particularly help both healthcare providers as well as pharmacy and pharma. Pharmaceutical companies. So it's kind of a nice mix. And certainly the DOJ guidance, particularly it seems like it comes out every few months, right? With something new. Just kind of working through that most recently with text messages and preserving communications. So it's good, interesting work.
I'm curious how you got into the life science and the pharmaceutical space. Does your background lend to that?
So I did a lot of healthcare fraud when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and also coordinated the civil and criminal healthcare fraud initiatives through the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I bring that background, and the firm has a really strong life science practice. So it's a nice complement.
Now, are your clients mostly in the Denver, Colorado area, or do you have a national practice?
I have a national practice. I have some clients in Colorado, but definitely have it all over. And because of Zoom, it makes it so much easier to chat.
I know. Yeah. It's actually made life easier in many ways. I'm kind of curious, obviously you're with Arnold and Porter that's done work nationally and internationally for many years, well before Zoom. But in terms of networking and, getting more clients, do you think Zoom's helped in that space, or do you think it's kind of hindered? What some people have said, that one-on-one interaction with the client?
So I think it's helped a lot because it's it allowed me at least to meet people and connect during COVID. But it's funny now that the world has opened up again, you realize nothing replaces in-person communication. Particularly, I have a couple individual clients, and getting to sit down with them in person makes such a big difference, because as you both well know, the process can be terrifying for an individual. And so to be able to kind of meet with them and sit across the table from them is good.
Let's talk about representing individuals. You're a big firm, and most big firms do not represent individuals. Is that something that you want to do? Do they allow you to do it? How does that work out with the firm?
Sure. I have a couple of individuals. I don't have a lot. The firm is very supportive of it. Often it's, someone else has the company, and so then they've referred an individual to me. So I like a mix of it. I mean, I think, corporations it's not as wrenching for them as, the individual representation is. You have all skills that you didn't quite realize beyond the law. Sometimes you act as a therapist as opposed to just a
That's exactly right.
So
we're counselors in the true sense of the word.
All the defense attorneys that we've had on say the same thing. It's really funny.
Yes.
So you were in the government for a very long time. You were a prosecutor. Many would say career prosecutor in many ways, right? Transitioning to big law after being a prosecutor for so many years can have its own challenges, particularly when it comes to networking and getting business. What did you find to be the easiest part of the transition and the most difficult part of the transition?
Wow. I think the easiest was just, it's, even though it's a different side of the work, it's work I've done for a long time. So you're really familiar with the pace, the flow, the actual legal principles at stake here, right? But that's also sometimes the hardest, in the government, you have the power to be quite blunt and to be on the other side and adjust to that and realize, oh, okay, it was an adjustment for sure, So it's been, I think that would be both the easiest and the hardest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, the space really well, but the power has definitely shifted hands right on this side.
Yes.
Why did you finally make the decision to move into private practice?
It is hard. So what I like to say is I think being in AUSA was the best job I'll ever have, but it's kind of like that great cocktail party. You're having the best time, but sometimes you just have to leave. And it's just, it's time to go home or whatever it is.
The last drink's going to be one too many.
Yes. It was just, I'd been there a long time. I had run the criminal division for a couple of years. It was just time to do something new and different. And so I decided to make the switch, and I'm really happy. It's turned out to be a wonderful change.
Okay. Where are you based out of now?
I'm still in Denver.
You're still in Denver. So when I was in AUSA in Miami, and people would say, oh, it's justice in paradise, which I always thought was pretty funny. I can imagine it's the same for you because Denver's incredibly beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit about that office and what it was like to be an AUSA in that office? Because actually that office, I did have a case I worked on with that office when I was in Miami, and no one leaves that office. It does not have high turnover. Even the agents don't leave the agencies in Denver. It's one of the hardest locations to get into, particularly with the FBI and as an AUSA. So tell us a little bit more about what life was like in Denver working in that office.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, I don't need to be advertised, but Colorado is an amazing place to live, and I think it's been discovered. So yes, I think some of it is just the quality of life here and the great weather and the opportunities. But you are right. People tend to stay. I think that's changing. I think, the office is hiring, more people who see this as a place to go for a few years, get experience, and then move on. But, I think also there are some people that just realize this is really what they want to do. And, it's got great benefits, great pay. And so they just settle in. But the office has changed a lot since I started. I mean, I think Denver's changed, and the office reflects that. Yeah. It's gotten more cosmopolitan, bigger.
You held a lot of positions at the U.S. Attorney's Office, including like the chief of the criminal division, and you're a woman and a minority. Did you have a hard time managing people? Was it difficult to get the position? How did it all come about?
I was the first female and the first minority criminal chief. So that combination, there were challenges that comes with that, right? And I think managing in the government is amazing, but I think it always has some challenges. But I think, yeah, it was hard at times to be a minority woman. Frankly, to be a minority woman in the profession, there's not a lot of us who did prosecution. And you walk in the room and you're the only woman and sometimes the only minority, and just navigating that at times can be tough.
Yeah, it happens a lot. It happened a lot. I think it's happening less now, but
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you manage people or find a way to manage people, understanding that there may be some, difficulties in how they're responding to you and not being used to the role that you're playing? How did you get through that, if you will?
So one of the things that was nice is because people stayed at the office so long, they knew me and I knew them, for many of them. So I think you already had a relationship that you built up, and just trying really hard to spend some time talking to people, not about their cases, just making sure they realized you were there, and being able to offer advice and talk through the issues, I think really helps. But it's a busy workload. And frankly, the criminal chief from Miami, I think about her comment, Joan, where she said,
Yes.
you have to spend some time just spending time with people. And I thought that was just a great piece of advice, like just making sure they know you're there for them.
Yeah, Joan's great, and she's been doing it for a really long time. It's not an easy job. Would you say that's more of your leadership style? Is everyone has one, right? Is it more of, reaching out to people and, communicating with them one-on-one, as opposed to just being a sort of figurehead type of leader?
Yeah, I think I like to really get involved. I like to learn the issues and figure out what's going on. But I think my fault is sometimes I get really going fast and I get too much going on. And I have 2 kids and I'm married, and sometimes I just I spread myself too thin.
I think we all do.
Yes.
So I want to shift a little bit and talk about one specific case. I know you prosecuted a lot of cases and you went to trial on a lot of cases while you were with the government. But there is one relatively well-known case that you prosecuted. And that's the case of Harold Henthorne, who was accused of murdering his wife. You remember the case, I'm sure.
Yes, very well.
So my first question is, what is a federal prosecutor, or why is a federal prosecutor prosecuting a murder case?
Yes.
How does that come about?
So the federal government prosecutes murder cases that occur either in the prison, on reservations, or on federal land. And Harold Henthorne chose to murder his wife in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is exclusive federal jurisdiction. So that is how he came to our attention about this mysterious accident that had happened. And
I don't know much about the case. I know that Marisol does, and obviously you do. Can you tell us some background before you go into the details, if you don't mind, Suneeta?
Sure. So the story is Harold Henthorne and his wife were on a hiking trip for their 12th wedding anniversary. And late in the day, they go off trail to a very remote area of the park. And Tony Henthorne and his wife falls from a cliff and dies. And Henthorne says it's an accident. And it seems there's a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of weird things, a lot of red flags on his description of what happened. So we started looking into it, and it took a lot of, great investigative work by a number of agencies, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office, financial auditor. But we also found that Harold had taken out $4.5 million of life insurance on Tony Henthorne as well. And then the kicker is that his first wife had died on around their 12th wedding anniversary in a mysterious accident where it was only Harold and her.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Had you ever done a murder case before this?
I had done a couple, because Colorado has a couple Native American reservations. So I'd done some murders there, as well as there's a large federal prison complex. But this was so different because this was absolutely circumstantial. I mean, there was no witnesses, there was no, fingerprints, nothing to work on, right? It's in a remote area in the middle of Rocky Mountain National Park. So it was.
How did you put that together, knowing, okay, he has this life insurance policy, the other wife died when 12 years. Okay, it may just all be coincidence. Tell us how it was actually like put together to build a case against him.
It was a number of things, and it's a good example of how your cell phone can get you into trouble, right?
Okay.
Because it was a lot of plotting, his phone, and we realized that he went up to the park 12 times leading up to this trip, scoping things. He sent all these text messages, but then on the 911 operator, he said his phone was dying. Then he proceeded to send all these text messages to various people. His story was really inconsistent, and a lot of it is the scene. So one of the fun things is we got to hike to the scene. Let me just say, there was no reason for a couple in their mid-50s to go to this spot. Like, it took a lot of work to get there. And he claimed it was for a romantic time. And no, just no.
There's branches and rocks and no.
It's bumpy.
And the story didn't match up about how long it took. And then there were small things, like he claimed he saw a white sheet nearby. Well, we found out that the white sheet had been taken down a week earlier. And so he clearly had been scoping the area. So it's just like, it was like 1,000 different pieces of evidence that we painstakingly put together.
So how long after the death of the wife does he get prosecuted? Do you remember?
He got indicted. We think we were able to present the indictment 2 years later, and then he got tried 2 years later.
And who was the first, if you can tell us, what was the first agency or agent or law enforcement officer that said, wait, something's fishy here, we should investigate?
Is National Park Service. So they have an investigative branch that I don't think people are super familiar with. And frankly, it was this ranger who drove down. I mean, Rocky's pretty remote, drove down to Henthorne's house 2 days later to take the statement, said, this doesn't seem right, and let the investigative agent, Beth Schott, know. And then, started the whole process. The Bureau got involved pretty quickly too.
Yeah. I want to ask about his ex-wife, I guess, his first wife. Did there come to be any closure with respect to that case? Did anybody ever look at that case? What did her family have to say about this? Because that's an interesting piece of this puzzle.
It really is. So he killed her, we think. She died, I should say, in 94. She died on the side of the road. She was changing a tire with Henthorne, who said his back hurt and the car fell on her. But in that era, the cell phones, we didn't have the same technology. Right. They weren't the same type cell phones. So you couldn't do any of the tracking. And it was not on federal land. The local DA's office looked into it, or I guess the sheriff's department, but they closed the investigation. I do think, so we got to introduce under 404B evidence about that accident in our trial. And I think that really helped her family. They got some closure. Right. They got to have her talked about and discussed. So it was.
So for our listeners who don't know, do you want to quickly just tell them what 404B is? I mean, obviously Marisol and I are very familiar with it, but why don't you tell our listeners who may not know what that is?
Sure. It's a rule of evidence that allows you to introduce prior evidence of bad acts for certain reasons. And in this case, we were able to successfully argue it showed plan and preparation as well, that he learned from that he was able, Henthorne did, that he could apply to this one.
Well, the judge permitted you to use that evidence, even though Henthorne's lawyers strongly objected to the use. And how do you think that evidence impacted the final result at the trial?
It's hard to say, because I think your reaction was telling, Vanessa. Like, everyone's like, okay, the life insurance, the weird spot, and then you hear, I think it had the appropriate impact pursuant to the rules of evidence, what it was supposed to have. But I think it's sort of,
did he take a life insurance policy out on the first wife?
He did.
Oh, see.
Well,
okay.
how did you introduce the evidence? Did you have, I think I saw on the docket, like maybe you introduced the investigation as to the first death?
We did. We had the sheriff's office, the various people that responded. Thankfully, some of them were still around. So we called them and put them on the stand to just sort of talk through it. But we were careful to always call it this, accident, right? But yes, so we had a full day just on that. And, that was not always pleasant for these people to be dredging up why they didn't do more in
Right.
1994, so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they were also glad that they had some level of closure with respect to this target or suspect,
Exactly.
and that's a good thing that you were able to do. I know that in this case there were some interesting tactics, right? I guess the jurors had to take a trip up to the 9th floor of the courthouse just to see the height of the fall.
They tried to do that. The government tried
Yes.
it. Right?
Can you just tell us about? I mean, it seems pretty obvious from pictures, and I'm sure you guys took photographs of the location. How did you respond to this request? And, what was the reasoning that the government provided in terms of why they wanted to do this?
So this case, it's like truly the scene is such a key evidence. Like if you went there, so what the story Henthorne was is they were there on this little rocky ledge and that she just fell. If you go to this ledge, you realize he had to push her. Like, there's no place to be at this spot. And then it's such a sheer drop. I had to lie on my stomach to peer over because I had a little fear of heights, right? So there's no way you would just sort of loosey-goosey stand there and, and do that. So we're trying to really recreate that for the jury. And it was really hard. We did all these things. So one of the thoughts was for them to get some idea of just how the body just like instinctively, you don't sort of, you're very cautious. We asked to see if they could just look down from the floor of the courthouse to get a sense of what that sheer drop was like. But the judge said they could figure that out on their own.
Why not ask to take them to the actual cliff?
So we thought about that a lot. It is not easy to get to. You have to hike at altitude and then you have to go off the beaten trail and then down a sheer rocky scree. So we'd have to take all the jurors, we'd have to take the judge, the court reporter, right? As well as Henthorne was in custody. So, and his lawyers. It would have been too physically daunting.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a logistical nightmare. But it's really interesting because as I hear you, I think about how technology has changed how you try a case like that. Now you could get very, very cool, accurate drone footage, perhaps, that you could seek to admit. And, it just changes the various aspects in which you can present a case.
It does. The Park Service at the time did not let you put drones in national parks. We actually got permission from the Secretary of the Interior. And the poor Park Service agent hikes all the way up there and the drone crashed promptly.
Oh.
So there's this footage of it going and then black.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
But we did have a bunch of fancy cameras. So you're right. Technology definitely came into play.
Now, Henthorne continues to fight his conviction today. And I know he filed a motion claiming his lawyer was ineffective, and the hearing was just held a couple of months ago or in 2022, at the end of 2022. Are you still involved in the case? Do they still call you for hearings to testify? What happens?
I don't get called anymore. They do kindly keep me apprised. And so I like to stay updated. And the agents as well as the AUSA who tried it with me. But that the judge denied that. So I think finally now we're in the clear, which is good.
Good.
Yeah.
So there's been reports that an alternate juror, I guess, cried when towards the end of the case he was told, because our audience may not know this, but jurors are not told that they're alternates. If you've sat on a jury more than once, you probably know the order in which you're sitting and your number, that you are the alternate. But I guess if you haven't, you don't really understand that. And I guess this juror, when he was told you're the alternate, we'll call you if something happens during the deliberations and we need you, started crying and had some sort of emotional outburst. That had to have been unusual in your career at that point.
There was two big juror moments that are unusual. So one was this alternate juror, and the judge actually picked a weird seat to be the alternate. I think it was like 4 or something. So it wasn't intuitive. And yeah, he was really upset because he was so invested. And then after the jury delivered their verdict, one of the jurors ran over and hugged Tony Henthorne's mother.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, never
Yes.
happened, right?
Never
But-
happens.
Never.
So,
Never.
and so that was just crazy too. I mean, the jurors were really incredibly invested. And, as you guys well know, jurors are so diligent and really dig in and do their jobs. And, they looked at everything and were really involved in the case.
How long did they deliberate for?
I think they deliberated for a day and a half.
And I have to ask you this other question. Did anyone on the government side communicate with any juror after the verdict? Did the jurors call the government? Did you call the jurors?
So Colorado has a rule that you're not allowed to contact jurors after a verdict.
Okay.
So we never have gotten to talk to them. But they spoke to us a little bit in a group. The judge let that happen.
Okay.
And one of the younger jurors said that he was able to help with all the camera stuff because he goes, I play a lot of video games, so I could explain to the older people what they were looking at. I was like, oh, good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, they're real people.
They're real people.
They are. And I want to ask you a little bit about the emotions of the case, because I tried a case against a serial kidnapper and rapist who was crossing state lines. And that's how the feds got involved, because if you're doing that in a state, that's one thing. But when you start trucking across the country, it's a totally different thing. And there were accusations that he had killed. And we do believe that he had killed 2 prior girlfriends. It was a very emotional case. We had 404B from his ex-wife who managed to survive and had facial reconstruction surgery. I mean, it was crazy. But jurors cry and they become visibly emotional. And there's different ways you can react to that from the government standpoint, because you don't want a verdict that's coming down just because it's purely emotionally driven. But yet you want to be human in that moment. How did you deal with those things as the trial attorney? Did you acknowledge breaks for water, or did you help us to understand how you personally dealt with that?
So that one thing is, I was emotional, right? Like, this is, as you know, it's heavy stuff. And I think that we gave breaks. We also, frankly, the pace, we tried to sort of be intentional about how we ordered the witnesses. So sometimes you'd have a pretty dry witness after a particularly gut-wrenching one,
You put on the agent. The cell phone examiner. There you
go. But that's the one I remember at my closing. I actually choked up at one point at the very end of my close. And I was like, okay, take a deep breath here, because it's tough work sometimes what we do, on either side.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we want to switch gears a little bit and ask you some of our fun questions.
Oh, good. Okay.
So my first question is, what is your favorite place to visit?
Oh, gosh, anywhere new.
Good answer.
I love traveling. So I like seeing.
So then what was your last place that you visited that was new and exciting for you?
The last, well, with COVID, it's been harder, but my family went to Cozumel, which was fun. And then I went with my law school friends a month earlier to Mexico City. So I guess I'm a little bit on a Mexico kick, but, but I like to go places with good food and hopefully some chance to get outdoors a little bit and be active. And I like cities and I like worlds. So I'm usually good to go.
Yeah. Mexico City has great food. So it was a good choice.
It does. We ate
really
our
does.
through it.
It really does. It's a mecca for good food and good sights and everything.
Do you and your family have any summer plans, vacation plans?
We are going to 2 family reunions, and we're trying to squeeze in a family trip between that. My son graduates high school next week. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So he's got a lot of plans on his own.
And if you don't mind us asking, where's he going to college? Because that's a big deal.
He's going to Duke in North Carolina.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. I went there for law school. It's a great campus. It's a beautiful place.
I've heard it's beautiful. beautiful. I've yet to go, so I'm excited to see it when I drive.
Well, it's very, very different from Colorado. The city, the demographics, everything, but it really, really is a great place to go to school and live. Look, there's a lot of businesses there for a reason. What would you say is one of your greatest strengths?
I think my greatest strength is that my ability to connect with people. I'm an extrovert. I like to meet people. I like to find out, more about them and just enjoy. I'm a people person.
Can you tell us one thing most people don't know about you?
I backpacked around the world for 5 months after college.
Really?
And for some reason, it doesn't come up. I don't know why.
Nobody ever asked about these things, right?
I know.
Well, along that backpacking trail, what was the, most interesting adventure you had or most difficult thing you had to deal with?
It was crazy because it was pre-cell phones and pre-internet. So of course my kids have no conception of what that world is like.
Right.
But we were in China in 1993 when, it was like you couldn't speak the language, you couldn't communicate, hiked in Nepal. It was amazing. But I feel like the world in some ways was a safer place back then than
That's
it
true.
is.
Probably. That's true. What is one thing on your bucket list?
I would like to do one of those fancy back road type vacations or one of those where you get to bike and drink wine and eat and they carry your stuff.
A fancy glamping sort of driving.
No, I want to stay in inns. I'm not camping.
You're done with the camping and the backpacking.
Exactly.
She's like, I've made it in life. Okay, I've made it. So the work you've done as a prosecutor, your past work was very heavy, and investigations and dealing with clients on the defense side also has its heavy lifting emotionally.
Yes.
What do you do like for fun, like just to keep sane in your daily life?
Well, I like to exercise. I love games. I recently picked up pickleball. I'm part of the craze.
Are you really?
Oh my God. So many people are doing this.
Everybody loves
it.
Yeah.
I'm always, I do like games a lot. I like to read. I like to, see my friends, drink wine, all those good things.
We all like that. What's the best advice you've ever received?
I think I've received a lot of good advice. I'm sort of going to try to think. I think it's a combination of you got to stay true to yourself. You have to find your own voice. I think particularly as a minority female prosecutor, a lot of the models you saw were sort of the folksy, older white men, right? And you have to figure out what works for you. So I think making sure your authentic self is probably the best.
Do you have any trial superstitions or things you do every single trial for like a good luck sort of, good luck badge to have on?
I eat a lot of dark chocolate. I have to have my dark chocolate stash.
Do you keep it in court with you? Do you keep it on the side? Yeah.
It's in court. It's there.
That's pretty funny. Do you, how do you manage your life? I know you said you had 2 young kids. How do you manage your professional life with having 2 young kids?
Well, they're not so young anymore. They're teenagers. So they're
well, that's in some ways that's kind of worse, right? I mean, but
really, it's busy, right? It's just making sure sometimes I get caught up in stuff that isn't important, right? So it's making sure I focus on what is and carving out some time for myself. I like to read a lot. So I've been trying to do more things that I like, but I can't say I found the answer. I think that finding balance seems to be this eternal quest that I don't know that we ever achieve,
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't think so either. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
That's a great question. I think I'd like to see myself hopefully working a lot less and doing a lot more of my leisure pursuits.
And what would you tell 20-year-old Suneeta? What advice would you give her and other 20-year-olds out there?
Oh, worry so much less. People don't think nearly about the stuff that you think they do. And worrying doesn't help.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Balance is an illusion. We can agree with you there. The calm is kind of in the chaos. I guess that's what we've learned.
Yeah.
Suneeta, it's been awesome. We've reached 36. We can ask you 36 more, but we don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been amazing. Thank you for doing this with us. And it's been fun. Hopefully you had fun.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you all. And I just want to say this is so wonderful to have two amazing women supporting women. So thank you very much.
If you're ever in South Florida, come look us up. We'll have wine.
We'll have wine.
We'll find out what books you've been reading. I wanted to ask you what book you've been reading, but what are the 37? We'll catch up and we'll that's what we all got to do. Powerful women.
That sounds great. That sounds
great.
Thank you. Bye.